If you speak English, they translate from the office. Instead, if you speak in Italian, Cecilia will do the translation here. Those who speak, they should come in front because there is the camera catching you and also the microphone. Otherwise, they will not hear from there. Okay? Also impressions, feedbacks, feelings, questions, of course. We always need some brave men or women to break the ice. We have a, how can I say, well-known brave man in Sofia. He's always the first one to ask questions.
Sono un ex musulmano e sono sacerdote e la ringrazio della sua presenza.
I'm a former Muslim and a Catholic priest.
La ringrazio della sua presenza e della possibilità che ci ha dato di condividere questo momento con questi ragazzi e ragazze.
I thank you for this opportunity to be here with all of you and for being here together with these young people, younger people.
Questi giorni con i ragazzi, ma soprattutto ascoltando anche ieri il video messaggio che ci ha mandato, sto percependo un altro Islam.
Listening to the talks that have been given, così non dovete girare troppo. Listening to the talks that have been given, I'm understanding a new type of Islam.
Io derivo da una famiglia musulmana. Quando mi sono battezzato e quindi poi quando ho preso questa strada,
I come from a Muslim family, and when I was baptized and when I entered into this pathway,
mio padre è andato dall'imam a dire quello che è successo.
My dad went to the imam to tell him what was happening.
E l'imam gli ha risposto: era meglio per tuo figlio morire piuttosto che fare questa scelta.
And the imam said to my father, it was better that your son should die rather than to enter into this, to make this choice.
Ora io vedo nella sua persona una persona molto competente, illuminata anche.
So in you I see someone who is highly competent, somebody who is truly enlightened.
Mio padre è ateo, è comunista.
My father is an atheist, he's a communist.
E lui tuttora dice: tu sei vivo grazie al mio ateo, perché se fosse stato credente ti avrei dovuto tagliare la gola.
And he said that you are only alive today because I'm an atheist, because if I were a believer I should have cut your throat.
Ieri a un certo punto ha detto: in dei punti prenderà il quinto. Noi dobbiamo sono tanti nel mondo che non credono, no? Ed è stato quel momento che mi è sceso qualche lacrima perché mi è venuto in mente papà.
So when you spoke yesterday and you said that there are many people in the world who don't believe, I shed some tears because I thought of my father.
Se fosse suo figlio a fare una domanda simile, lei cosa avrebbe risposto?
If your son were to ask you this same question, what would you answer?
E per tanti anni, grazie a questa cosa, grazie, o non so come dire, io ho odiato l'Islam, veramente ho odiato l'Islam. Non i musulmani, perché avrei odiato la mia famiglia, ma l'Islam in sé.
And for many years I hated Islam, not the Muslim people, because otherwise I would have had to hate my own family, but Islam.
3 anni fa mi è morta la mamma in un incidente stradale.
3 years ago my mother died in a car accident.
La seconda volta questa. E mentre mi accompagnava all'aeroporto, era già prete.
While she was accompanying me to the airport, I was already ordained priest.
E tornando a casa hanno fatto un incidente e mamma è morta.
And on my way home there was an accident and my mother died.
E sempre a papà, un imam, gli ha detto questa è la punizione divina che io avevo detto.
And again, an imam said to my father, this is the punishment that you are receiving for what has happened.
Perché tuo figlio ha fatto questa strada.
Because your son took this different path.
Lei che ne pensa di questa seconda cosa?
So what do you think of this second thing?
Grazie.
So what's the question?
The question is on the way back from the airport, accompanying him to the airport, the mother died in a car accident.
Yeah.
And an imam told his father, the death of your wife is a punishment from
Yeah.
God because of the choice of your son. What do you think about it?
About this
so
one?
This one and also the first one. This imam who said that it was better that your son would die than
In the name of God, the compassionate, merciful, thank you very much for the questions and sharing your life story. Islamically, we believe that faith is something that every person should decide between himself or herself and God. So, when you reach the age of discernment, you should choose, not your father or mother or family or community. You should choose what's the best way to answer to love of God, how you can better respond to the love of God that you have received. So parents or community cannot force to be faithful or to be atheist. It's your choice. Yes, maybe from a legal perspective, when someone is born into a Muslim family, we consider as a Muslim for certain rulings, but this is just a practical thing. You become faithful when you reach the age of maturity and you decide to commit yourself to faith. And as I will explain, God willing, today, in my understanding of Islam, which I think is not exclusive to me, the main thing is to submit to God. The secondary thing is how to do it. Unfortunately, we prioritize how to do it over submission to God. The main thing is that you want to be submissive to God, and this part is shared by good Muslims, good Christians, good Jews. They submit themselves to God. Then what you have to do to show this, to express this, then it can be different in different even denominations of the same faith. As a Catholic, as a Protestant, as a Muslim, Sunni, Shia, we may have different ways to express that we are obedient, we are submissive. But this is secondary. For me, the main thing is that you decided to be faithful. You decided to submit yourself to God. You were not affected or influenced by your father, who was atheist. So that's the main thing. So God is the only one to accept your faith and your submission and your response. It's not to us to accept or reject. So if you felt that you are genuinely responding to God, and that was a way to make your connection with God more, stable and more fruitful, and you saw the fruits in your life, then this can be a sign that God was pleased. But I have no capacity, to judge it between you and God. I wish God accepts everyone's, faith, but I cannot, decide about this. Even I cannot decide about my own response to God. But if you see that this was genuine and brought good fruits, this can give you hope that God accepted. And your father, even if he was atheist, still he must have been paving somehow the way for you. by bringing you up as a child that belonged to a family and received love in family. I think that paves the way, because if you don't receive love from family, or you don't know who are your parents, or things like this, it can make the path towards God more complicated. So I can see value of an atheist father who was committed to family life, to his wife, children, etc. And maybe we didn't see signs of faith in him, but still God appreciates parents who look after their children with love. So I don't think your father had no role at all in you becoming faithful. Whether he, realized or not, he somehow has helped you. Maybe he could help more, but still he helped you without knowing, maybe. And I don't think your mother would be punished because of your choice. We have full understanding that every person is responsible. Your mother is responsible for her choices. These choices can be personal choices or choices she made in parenting, how to bring you up. But at the end, everyone is responsible for her own choices. And unfortunately, when there is suffering, when there is loss, when there is illness, some people rush to say this is a punishment from God. Okay? Like the story of Job, the prophet Job, that some people said, you suffer because God must be angry with you. But we say, if you are suffering, first make a check. So this is what I always say in my lectures. Whenever you are suffering, for example, maybe you have family problems, and there is divorce, there is loss, there's poverty, you lost your job, whatever. First check, did you do anything to contribute to this suffering or not? Sometimes I am responsible for this suffering. Sometimes I didn't know how to behave properly in workplace, I lost my job. Sometimes I didn't, make sure that this person is good, for example, a spouse or married, now I have problems, etc. Sometimes I was not careful about my diet, I have health issues. So when I'm suffering, first I have to see whether I caused or contributed to this suffering or not. If I caused or contributed this, I should repent and change the course of action. From the time I repent and change the course of action, even if I caused or contributed, this becomes sacred. So far was not sacred. But now that I say, oh God, I accept that I was responsible for this suffering, and now I want to listen to you how to fix this or to reduce it, then becomes sacred. But if I check and I had nothing to do with this, I was just walking, someone, hit me by car, now I am, injured, or maybe for the rest of my life I have to suffer, I had no role. This from beginning is sacred. So as soon as we put our suffering in front of us as a kind of sacrifice, which is for, becoming a more patient and more obedient and more loving person, this becomes sacred. So your mother passed away, but for you this is a sacred suffering, not a punishment. Okay? Because you didn't cause anything to your mother, death. So now it's an opportunity for you to see how this suffering can make you a better person, how this can make you a more loving person, how this can make you improved in your relation with God and people. Sometimes through these sufferings, we better appreciate the remaining of the blessings that we have, and sometimes you can do something more in memory of your mother to help people. So this is a brief kind of generic answer, but what to say about specific cases, this is very difficult because you need to know lots of details, and in the end, even if you know many details, you don't know perfectly every detail, so only God can judge. But I can just give this kind of general answer. I hope it's useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I just read it. No, that's right.
No,
Then it goes to the
Leoncio, could you go there? Because otherwise they see only your back. You have to, the camera is there. Yeah, yeah, like this.
Thank you, everyone. My sharing is the impression from the talks of today, but also what I heard personally from Dr. Shomali on the 1st of December this year. That dialogue is beautiful and is possible. I bring from the experience of my community something that has remained very strong in Uganda. It was time of war from 1986 to 2008, 22 years. There were many attempts to solve the conflict. Political leaders, cultural leaders, opinion leaders, elders, but never was it possible to stop the war. But God inspired my Archbishop, who made friendship with an Anglican bishop, with a Muslim Sheikh, with an Orthodox bishop. They became together. Something that had never happened. Aware of the background that there were also problems between Catholic and Anglicans before. So during the suffering of the people, even before they began to talk much, children and others would go to sleep in the town, night commuting, because of the fear of the rebels. And our bishops, these leaders, began also walking with a sack of bag with their blankets to go spend nights in the park. It was a very big embarrassment to the government and other authorities. But they said, if children sleep in the park, how can we sleep in the house? It was only that gesture of dialogue and living concretely together with the suffering children on the streets that the government accepted dialogue. Mm-hmm. That also the world began to listen to the plight of our problems. Dialogue started and the war ended. As a parish priest, whenever there were community problems, my parish is very close to South Sudan. So cross-border problems, land conflicts, the highest respected body until now is this body called Acholi Religious Leaders Peace Initiative. Because, as you shared, there is a moment that people want to listen to a Muslim leader, even if there's a Catholic bishop or an Anglican bishop. They said, when people are gathered, there is no more one community that you find that they are all Catholics, they are all Muslims, they are all Anglicans. People are all together already. And they go to the same market, they go to the same buses, they use the same water points, already by nature, the same land. So sometimes it is we leaders who create more problems. Because from down, we see people live already together. So it is a big grace, Sophia and Lopiana, for this moment, week of unity for me. Because whenever I invited this body, which I participate in now also from Uganda, you see people see them as God. But when you bring on a political leader, they are respected, yes, but something missing. You bring only one group of leadership, but when this body comes together, so here comes what you said on that conference on the 1st of December, which Hara, my brother, attended, of our peace project, when we say that let us be open to the Spirit of God, because there is a moment where God speaks through the Muslims. I never heard this before. There's also a moment that God speaks through Christians. Also, there's a time when God can speak through a Buddhist. So after the conference, I felt a moment again to see within myself. Sometimes we are so limited until when another person, as you just shared, Professor Roberto, that we need this openness. So the question that I have is, this is beautiful, but also there are so many organizations, institutions working for unity. But also we have continuing problems, old ones not finishing, new ones arising. What can we do? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
After you, I will add something.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think what we can do in the first phase is very little, because those who have power and money and influence are not religious leaders. Yeah. So we are people that we have to fix problems that others are creating. Yes, maybe sometimes in some localities, religious leaders cause problem. But if you look at the whole picture of the world, it's not that a bishop or a Muslim imam is creating problem. There are forces that are not religious or faithful, and they are interested in money, in power, in expansion, etc. They create problems. So our resources are very limited, and if we want to rely on our resources, we cannot do that much. But what we can do is to be instruments for God. We can be small instruments for God. And when God finds us sincere and gets involved in the little work that we do, then it would no longer be my work or your work. It would be God's work. Then there is no one who can resist. So I hope our unity can invite God to choose us as his instruments. And then there is no limit in what can happen. So if it is me as a person, I cannot even fix my own personal problems. Yeah? But if it is us as instruments for God, God can do even with our limited capacity a lot. So in the Quran, God says to the Prophet, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. You didn't shoot the arrow when you shoot. It was God. It means that although you did this, but you didn't do it on your own. So I hope our sincerity, which has now transcended one faith, because this is more important. God doesn't need only Muslim instruments or Catholic instruments or Protestant instruments. God needs united, faithful community as instruments, because there is something that you can do with each instrument. As a Muslim instrument, if I am listening to God, there is a limit in what I can do. But if we together with our unity, we let God use us, then I can, be very, very hopeful that we can do a lot, even if we are very small in number, because we are inviting God to use us. So our work is possible to affect many, many people, just to make sure that you don't look at it as your work. Yeah? It's God's work. And we are just listening to God. So I'm very hopeful when I look at it this way. I become very hopeless if I look at it as our work. As our work, we cannot do anything. But if it's God's work, and our unity is a sign that this is God at work, then I'm very hopeful that we can have big impacts on the global situation.
Just wanted to add one small thing, Mohammed.
Sure.
Thank you very much for your answers. Speaking of Uganda, I want to say something probably you know, but is not known at all in the world. As much as it is not known that Paul VI put his feet on Iran.
Yes.
Paul VI, when he came to Uganda, it was 1967, if I remember well, that he visited Kampala in Uganda. 69. He did something which is amazing. At a certain moment, knowing of the situation between Catholics and Anglicans, and also between Muslims and Christians, and knowing that there had been people killed because of their faith or faiths, he prayed for all the ones who lost their lives for their faith. For the first time, a pope prayed not for the Catholic martyrs. He didn't pray only for the Christian martyrs, but he prayed for all the people who lost their life for their faith, including the Muslims. And this is not known at all. Just to say that the leaders, the religious leaders, sometimes without they realize, they set some prophetic example, but we are not ready to perceive it. And by amplifying, by sharing, you pave a way to a pathway of hope also for the local people, no? And these are already signs of dialogue and amity between people of different cultures and different faiths. It's time for prayer, I think, for you. It's 12:10. So we can stop here the morning program. There is lunch, and then we'll meet again at 3 o'clock. And you'll be the first speaker or the second one?
Normally the second one.
The second speaker, yeah.
Can we tell the brothers that two of them will speak after you tomorrow evening? So if they can prepare something, you tell them?
Yeah.
Or I tell them?
Yeah, I can tell them.
You tell them.
Okay.